There's a psychology you can't really explain to anyone born after the year 2000. People who grew up before the digital age, especially those who were born in the late 1970s and early 1980s, carry a mindset that feels almost foreign today. They think differently. Not because they're stronger by nature, but because the world they grew up in forced their mind to develop in a very specific way. So today, we're breaking down 6 psychological reasons why people from the 1980s generation were built differently. Childhood in the 1970s. If you want to understand why people who were born in the 1970s and early 1980s think differently, you have to start with their childhood. This was a time of very little supervision. Children were not constantly watched, tracked, or corrected. If you left the house in the morning and came back hours later, no one panicked. There was no phone, no GPS, no instant check-ins. You had a bike, a few friends, and an unspoken agreement to find your own way home before dark. Psychologically, this environment did something powerful. It built an internal locus of control. Instead of growing up with the feeling that someone else is always managing things for me, children of that era learned, often without realizing it, that they were responsible for navigating the world. When something went wrong, there was no immediate adult intervention. You figured it out, or you adjusted and tried again. This kind of freedom also came with real risk. You fell, you got lost, you made mistakes. But those experiences acted as early training for the nervous system. In psychology, this is closely related to resilience and stress inoculation. When children face manageable risks early in life, their brain learns that discomfort and uncertainty are survivable. Instead of interpreting stress as danger, their mind learned to see it as a problem to solve. Another important piece here is self-direction. Without constant instructions, children had to decide what to do, where to go, and how to handle conflict on their own. That built a quiet inner confidence, not loud, not performative, just a steady belief that says, "I'll figure it out." Even today, many people from this generation still carry that voice inside them. They may not always know the answer, but they trust their ability to adapt. This also shaped their sense of safety. Safety didn't come from external control or constant reassurance. It came from knowing they could handle themselves. In psychological terms, this relates to attachment and safety models, where security is internal, not dependent on someone always watching over you. The 1970s childhood wasn't easier. It was simply less managed. Post-war influence. To fully understand the psychology of people shaped by the 1970s, you have to look one generation back. Many of them were raised by parents who either lived through World War II or grew up in its immediate aftermath. These were people who had experienced real fear, real hunger, and real uncertainty. Survival was not an abstract idea to them. It was something they had lived. Because of that, their parenting style was very different from what we see today. They didn't talk much about emotions. They didn't explain life through long conversations or motivational language. They didn't dramatize stress. They simply did what needed to be done. From a psychological perspective, this is a clear example of social learning theory proposed by Albert Bandura. Children don't primarily learn values from lectures. They learn by observing behavior. And what they observed at home was a quiet, steady form of resilience. Parents worked long hours without complaining. They fixed things instead of replacing them. They carried responsibility without announcing it. Without realizing it, children absorbed a survival mindset. Life was serious, but manageable. Problems were normal, not emergencies. Responsibility wasn't framed as punishment. It was simply part of being alive. This is also where generational transmission of trauma and resilience comes in. The fear, discipline, and endurance formed during wartime didn't disappear. It passed down, not through stories, but through daily habits, tone, and expectations. Children learned that you don't fall apart when things get hard. You adapt instead of waiting for rescue. You contribute even when it's uncomfortable. Because this mindset was never verbally explained, it became deeply internalized. It didn't feel like pressure, it felt like reality. That's why many people from this generation seem emotionally contained, grounded, and practical. Their strength wasn't built through encouragement or affirmation. It was built by growing up next to adults who had already learned how to survive and quietly showed them how to do the same. Early maturity. One of the most noticeable psychological traits of people shaped by the 1970s is how early they matured. Not because they wanted to grow up faster, but because life required it. From a young age, they were expected to help, to notice what needed to be done, to take responsibility without being asked. If something broke, you didn't immediately replace it, you repaired it. If something went wrong, you didn't panic, you adapted. If there was a problem, there wasn't a system or a person coming to save you. The help was you. Psychologically, this created a strong sense of personal responsibility and a deeply internal locus of control. When children learn early that outcomes depend on their actions, their brain stops looking outward for rescue and starts looking inward for solutions. This is why many people from this generation don't overreact under pressure. Their nervous system learned that stress is not a signal to collapse, it's a signal to respond. The bridge generation. People shaped by the late 1970s and early 1980s belong to a very rare group. They are a bridge generation. They remember a world with no internet, no screens, and no constant noise. Life moved more slowly. Conversations were uninterrupted. Presence was natural, not something you had to practice. And then, later in life, they witnessed the arrival of the digital world. They didn't grow up online, they adapted to it. Psychologically, this matters a lot. Their identity was already formed before social media arrived. Their sense of self wasn't built through likes, comments, or visibility. It was built through doing things, fixing things, and interacting face to face. This is why many people from this generation carry a grounded presence. They don't feel the need to constantly perform. They're not competing for attention. They're not measuring their worth through public validation. The post-2000 generation. Let me know in the comments if you are in the Z generation or post-2000 generation. Born after 2000 entered the world already surrounded by screens. Phones, tablets, notifications, videos, messages, all competing for attention from a very early age. Their brain has been processing constant stimulation since childhood. From a psychological standpoint, this creates overstimulation and high cognitive load. The human brain was never designed to absorb this much information without rest. When stimulation never stops, attention becomes fragmented, focus gets weaker, mental fatigue becomes normal. Everyone comes to the world for their own tests. When we compare generations, it's easy to fall into judgment. But psychology teaches us something important. People are shaped by the environments they grow up in. Different conditions create different psychologies. Different psychologies create different strengths. You can't measure one generation using the standards of another. Now I want to hear from you. Which generation are you from? Before 1980 or after 2000? And honestly, which generation do you think had it harder, and why? Leave your thoughts in the comments. If this video made you see things differently, subscribe to us. Before we say goodbye, I want you to remember, the 1970s generation learned how to endure. The 2000s generation is learning how to manage overload. No one is weaker, just different tests from life. Paw signing out. Stay sharp, stay weird.